Good morning, Tim. How you doing today?
Good morning, Fred. Welcome from the middle of the Atlantic here.
Yeah, you're in the South Atlantic now, huh?
Yeah, we crossed the equator last night. They tooted the ship's horn. It was a big deal.
Wow.
Yeah, and we'll be in Brazil tomorrow morning at about 8 o'clock. So
Wow.
we're
That's
probably three-quarters of the way across.
that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it
You
really is. We had
yeah,
to move the clock back this morning again.
right? You were and you had to stop somewhere off the coast of Africa, right? You had to stop
Cape
somewhere there?
Verdes, Cape Verdes Islands,
Yeah.
Verbo, I think it was called. Mindillo was the name of the island. It's kind of interesting. Right in the mid, slap in the middle of nowhere. I said to the guy, "You got hurricanes here?" He said, "They start here. This is where they start."
Yeah, I imagine that's true. You see them on the maps coming from that part of Africa. Yeah. Well, we've had a couple of guests in your absence, and I got a couple of more friends planned to jump in over the next week or so.
Yeah, I
Um,
listened to a couple of them. Um, your take on the dollar um, warranted me to try to put my 2 cents in here. I think you're negative on the dollar. You think a Trump win means a lower dollar, and from a standpoint of market manipulation, I would agree that he'll try to he wants a lower dollar, and
right.
he'll push the Fed to do it and do everything he can to lower the dollar for trade advantages. But that said, he's attacking, or at least his plan is to attack from the supply side, not the demand side. He wants to drill, baby, drill. He wants to lower tax rates to encourage output. You could see GDP grow. Could look a lot like the Reagan years, in a sense. You could see GDP grow a lot. And I think that should encourage capital investment here into the U.S. I say
But don't
here.
you think that's going to take time? Like, I think the initial move down on a Trump presidency, everybody's been talking about the Trump rally, and I know Maddie's very supportive of the dollar. I guess I'm in the minority, but I feel that the first year or two is going to be dollar negative, and then we'll start to see some of the investment that you're talking about. But initially,
That's a
I'm
fair
not.
point. That's a
Yeah,
fair point. If we want to look at from the standpoint of the first 100 days, I think he's going to start to announce that his tariff intentions and Mexico will give him a call and he'll
and
start to
and we're
negotiate.
we're talking like it's a done deal. Like he's won. It's we still got a week to go, and there's
Yeah,
still
no,
a
I
lot
don't
of
mean to
things
suggest
going on.
that. I don't
Yeah,
mean to suggest that. I think the first thing I said was under a Trump victory.
yeah.
You
And I don't
guys,
know where she stands in terms of the dollar, where Kamala stands in terms of dollar policy. I
I
don't
think
think
it's business
that's.
as usual. It's the syndicate's making the call. It's the new meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
the who. You
The
know?
Who, 1972, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I think the old boss feels the same as the new boss, and I don't see any change in direction under Kamala. It's the change under Trump that is, I think, the interesting part of the scenario. So
Yeah.
he'll push the Fed to lower rates, steeper curve, as you say, because he's still got massive debt to fund. Um, he'll start to have tariff conversation, and I think at that point, companies are going to start to make up their mind. This guy's serious about tariff, or he's not. And um, I think corporate America will feel, and even corporate globally, will feel that they're better off producing here in the U.S. to bypass any restrictive actions that he's willing to take.
I listened to the Trump Rogan podcast this weekend, driving home, in fact, 3 hours. And he brings up, a point that you're making, that he did that. He allowed money to come back. The tax advantages. This was back when he first was elected. There was a lot of tax implications about money that was offshore, and Apple brought a lot of money home So I imagine, I see your point that there, he will make an effort to bring money back to the U.S., whether it's U.S. corporations or foreign
Well, he'll
corporations
eliminate double
building them.
taxation for openers.
Yeah,
I mean, they'll say, I'm not gonna, you're taxed twice now. If they come back, you're only gonna be taxed once. And that at a lower rate than you're getting right now. So he's gonna encourage corporate investment here and corporate repatriation and corporate manufacturing here. So I see
yeah,
that happening right away.
and I had the question I asked both Matt and Alex yesterday. Um, do you really feel like tariffs are coming, or do you think this is just his opening salvo's negotiation in order to scare people away? You know?
I think China, there will be tariffs. I think he's got China at the end of his nose, one for COVID, and
Yeah.
two, that if he sees it the way I see it, and I think he does, that the American consumer is funding the Chinese military. And the Chinese military buildup is a direct function of the trade advantage that they derive. And I don't know what the Chinese trade balance is with us, but I got to assume it's a big piece of the overall trade balance.
I would think it's
Overall,
enormous. Yeah.
overall is what, 72, 73 billion a month, right? Is the trade deficit? It's got to be at least a third of that, maybe half of it.
Right.
So you're talking about something like $30 billion going their way. That's not coming our way. So there's room to move that. And somebody like India or Taiwan or Thailand, waiting to be a low-cost producer to replace China. And they'll do that. They might not be able to do it at the same level that China does. So, yeah, imports will go up marginally, but not drastically. And he's encouraging U.S. producers too. So, he's unleashing competition in that sense. So I think the plan is good and there's room for it, just given the trade deficits.
There was a point, I guess I said this about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I said, we're going to have a big problem funding our deficits when China builds a middle class. When they don't have to, sell everything to us, when they have their own, they can do everything internally. So they have a middle class that's going to buy the washers and dryers and their cars. And it hasn't really fully happened yet. I've been to China several times where there are the haves and the have-nots. They haven't really built the middle class. But once that comes about, they'll be self-sufficient. They're
Well,
going to need grain.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember Rama. You remember Rama?
Remember the name, but
Rama Prasad. Rama, his uncle was governor of State Bank of India, and he was plugged in pretty well. And he was talking to me about doing my seminars in India, and he said to me, people think of India as a poor country, and there's a lot of poverty in India. He said, but their middle class is not insignificant. It may not be the size of the U.S. middle class, but there is, and he gave me a number, and I forget what the number was, but it astonished me. I really didn't think the middle class was that big, but it is. It was then anyway. It's probably bigger now.
probably bigger
So-
now. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got an India that's perched here, would love to replace China, would love it.
Yep.
And maybe that's not, and I've always wondered why we don't focus on that as India being a rival, a competitor to China. But you could play India off against China in a trade deal. And it strikes me as Trump's the guy to do that.
Well, if you watch the Vivek podcast with Friedman, that's one of the things he pointed out. You got to keep our enemies separated, and you got to join together with our friends. To
Yeah.
make sure that part of the world is a little safer.
Yeah, well, he would be a good guy to set forth a new relationship with India. But we're just blue sky in here.
Yep.
And there's no telling. But my only point is that there are alternatives to the world as we see it, and I think that Trump, based on what he said anyway, and what he did, is open to exploit those advantages.
Hmm.
So that's the dollar, and
Yeah.
that's what happens under Trump. I know that I saw that you got an email, or at least a comment. Somebody said, what's it look like from the U.S. perspective?
Yeah.
And,
Brendan Sweden,
and,
yeah.
and the U.S. perspective is kind of interesting. I think
I went to vote.
Go ahead.
I went to vote early the other day.
Mhm.
It took me just about an hour to vote. There were 10 poll workers verifying who you were, that you were able to vote, and then there were 7 machines. And so think about how many people were working the polls, and it still took an hour to get through it. And it's the first time that I really felt comfortable that the process was done properly. You walked in, they checked you out, last name, first name, sign electronically, sign in ink, and then they hand you a ballot. And it's a paper ballot that you slip into a machine. And then you go through the machine and you press your buttons and you cast you pick your choices, and then it says verify. So you got to verify everything was good. Then it says print, and it physically prints on that sheet of paper that they gave you, that ballot that they gave you. It prints out all of your choices. Then it says verify again. So you got to verify that the print is what you actually came in at, because I guess there was some people that said I pressed button A and it showed up as button B. And then it says cast your ballot, and then it goes into the machine. So once it goes into the machine, my thinking anyway, is there's a digital copy and there's a physical hard copy of your ballot, of your vote. So felt very comfortable that the process is
Wow.
in the right step.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was never like anything
I was
like
never,
that.
yeah,
When I
I've never
voted
voted
out
like that. Exactly. Same here. So it was
I
a
was
very
a poll
different
watcher
experience.
once,
Right?
and I looked at the process, and it was fraught with peril. I mean, guys were from the incumbent were lining up right in front of the poll booth, basically intimidating people. I mean, I saw things that you wouldn't believe. I mean, there was a cop went into a beauty shop and had them take down a poster and replace the poster with another. This was a policeman.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that lady I used to date, the Cuban lady who was a teacher. She said to me once, "I can't believe I left a communist country to come to a communist country." And I bristled, I said, "What makes you say that?" And she said, "Well, I'm a teacher, and they told me that I have to pass out pamphlets for the mayor for 2 days." I said, "Well, what happens if you don't do it? That's illegal." She said, "Well, I was told that I would be reassigned." So that was going on right in Bergen County, New Jersey, not Bergen, Hudson County, New Jersey, North Bergen. So I don't really have a lot of confidence in how it's taking place in a lot of the O-line districts, but it seems like they've got a handle on it where you are.
Yeah, Monmouth County is certainly it was a strong process, very comforting to know that there are your vote's going to be counted.
Well, I
go
saw
on.
numbers today. I think by the time we're finished talking, we're going to get some output numbers. But the ADP payroll numbers were massively larger than expected. Now, that's not
Never really, correlation between ADP and payrolls.
Yeah.
People always try to make it.
unless it's so big, and it is. It's very big, but I don't think the market reacted to it. The 10-year's still approaching 4.30, and that with the Fed that's talking about lowering another 25 basis points, which further steepens the cave.
Did you see what I did with Alex yesterday?
I watched the thing with Alex. I thought it was very good. I
Yeah,
thought Alex was.
he's a
insightful.
very interesting guy. Yeah, and he was talking about that free app that the CME puts out about where the consensus is, and that's what he trades off of. He uses that in order to build
Well,
out his.
bear in mind that that's only futures and exchange traded derivatives.
Yeah.
It doesn't take the cash market into account.
True, but that's where a lot of people are laying off. What he's doing, the majority of his business is a cash futures arbitrage.
I've always looked at it as a microcosm. You know,
I think the futures market's gotten a lot bigger. The futures market's gotten a lot bigger. So I don't know if you could. I don't think it's a microcosm anymore. You know.
You think it rivals the
think
cash
it's-
market?
Yeah, because I
Some
think one
commodities,
leans on
maybe.
the other.
Maybe
I
in
think
gold.
I think in interest rates as well. You know, I think one leans on the other. We talk about TLT, and we talk about where that's at. That's
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. The ETFs have changed the landscape quite a bit.
yeah,
I used to say the tail wags the dog
right.
because the commodities market is much more leveraged than the cash market is. So you always see the move in the leveraged market first.
Yeah, yeah. Talking to someone yesterday, we were talking about the betting odds. This guy was in the UK and is asking my opinion and what I thought. And he says, the betting markets here in the UK have Trump way, way ahead. And I said, yeah, it's true. I'm reading that as well. I said, but I also read something that said, dismiss that because it's only the conservatives that are betting. You know, the
You know the Harry
the
Truman
Democrat.
story, right? You familiar with that?
What's that?
When
No.
Harry Truman ran against Dewey in 1948, all the polls had Dewey overwhelmingly favored. And I think it was the Chicago Tribune that published the first edition that said Dewey wins. And
Right.
the classic picture is Truman holding up that newspaper because Truman won. And what they did was the polls were polling from the telephone, and very few people, only the rich, had telephones in 1948. So the poll data was skewed.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember that was good night, Mr. Truman. Good morning, Mr. President. Right?
that's right. Yeah. You know, I'm sailing the ocean blue here, and I keep thinking about that Barclays Bank carrier lost story. Do you remember that?
That's right. Yeah,
I-
during the
I sat
Falklands,
dinner
right?
with- I sat at dinner with a guy who served on 2 aircraft carriers, and as soon as he said it, I thought, Harry, you remember the story, right? Should I tell the story?
Yeah, go on.
It was during the
Falklands War.
Falkland Island Wars, when Argentina was fighting Britain over the Falkland Islands. They called them something else. I forget what the Argentine term was. And the Argentines had Exocet missiles. And every time a missile would hit a British ship, the pound would drop. And somebody must have had a little chart. You know, like a battleship was worth like 50 pips, and and a destroyer was worth 75 pips. Who knows? But the British were sending the aircraft carrier Hermes across the ocean to fight, and it was loaded. And the Hermes was sailing with all these jets on it, and Barclays London. Barclays, no,
It was Barclays, New York.
Barclays,
Yeah,
New
with
York.
Frank in New York,
Duffy.
right.
Frank Duffy was the chief dealer. And he looked at the screen and he saw carrier lost. And he screamed out to Chris Paolo in London, Chris, they sunk the Hermes. And Barclays Bank globally started to sell the pounds short, banging out the pounds, bulk, large numbers. And then all of a sudden, a Telerate guy looked at Frank and he said, what's all the screaming about? You guys went crazy all of a sudden. He said, the carrier, look. And the Telerate guy took his fingers and put 2 wires together and said, okay, and it disappeared. It was the communications carrier, not the aircraft carrier. It was how Telerate notified you that the communications, and Barclays had to buy all the pounds back. It was massive. I was at Eurodollar. I was at Eurobrokers at the time as an innocent bystander watching the markets. What the hell's going on? The carriers.
That's right.
Oh, man.
That's right. Those were the days, the infancy of electronic trading, right? When it was like we used to say when I was at Manhattan, when I was at Chase in the early days, and you had screens that were indicative prices. Right? Every
Yeah.
bank would put their price up, and you'd have somebody, international paper wants to buy $50 million versus the Deutschmark, and the screen is showing 85.90. All right, show him 97. I could get 50 million bucks at 97. He says the screen is at 90, and my partner Anthony and I would look at one another and laugh and say, "Yeah, tell him to buy it from the screen." Right now, that's
today you
how
can
all
do it,
business is done. That's how all business is done. They do it with the screen. Yeah, exactly.
So.
All right, so you're on the you're on.
Curve.
Yeah,
Talking
still.
about a steeper curve, still.
Yep.
The dollar, I just threw a little something into your mix there to say that there might be some demand for dollars under a Trump win. It's,
Yeah, I think longer term I would agree with that, but I think short term, I think the initial reaction is going to be talk it down, talk it down, talk it down. I'll
Well,
let people come in and buy it.
I can only
Yeah.
say that the last time he won, it moved fast.
Mhm.
Corporations move fast. They made up, in fact, the interim period before he was inaugurated, something like 5 companies had already agreed to move back to the U.S. And Ford was doing a big plant in Mexico, I think. Ford might have changed it. It was 2016, it was a long time ago for an old man, but I remember a lot happened
He's
before
already-
the inauguration. So
He's already
he could.
tabbed who he wants to run his, what do you call it again? His committee inauguration, to set everything up again, set up his cabinet. And it's Howard
Yeah.
Lutnick from Cantor. You see that?
No, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's the part of the transition team, you mean?
The head of the transition team. That was it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did he do? They must have been a huge donator to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think, if memory serves me correctly, he is the nephew of Bernie Cantor, who started Cantor
I
Fitzgerald.
think you're right. Yeah. I think you're right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting now. There's a guy, he's technology savvy. I mean, his
Yep.
job has got to put him in the top end. And not just any technology, but technology to distribute communications.
Yep.
He's probably the leading edge of that.
You put
So
him in touch with Musk
he's good,
together.
Good choice with that, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Vivek, too. All right,
Yeah,
great. Well, we proved this can work. So
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah,
I'm in Brazil tomorrow night. I'll be on the sea again, but I'm outside the cabin because I get better bandwidth here. But that's great. All right.
All right. Enjoy.
All right.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Don't hang up.